I never thought I'd live to see the day when someone would threaten to bulldoze something on my own property. Something I built with my own two hands, but that's exactly what happened when my HOA decided my fence had to go. If you've ever dealt with a homeowners association, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Before I dive into this story, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And while you're at it, drop a comment below about your own HOA horror stories. I've been feeling pretty alone in this battle, and I'd love to hear I'm not the only one who's had to stand up to these neighborhood tyrants. I'm Bill, by the way, a retired construction foreman who's lived in the same house on Lakeview Drive for the better part of 22 years. My wife Margaret and I raised our two boys here, and now that they're grown with families of their own, we've been enjoying our peace and quiet. Our property backs up to a wooded area that leads down to Lake Serenity, and about 6 years ago, I decided to put up a privacy fence. Now, this wasn't just any fence. I spent months researching the local ordinances, checking property lines, and even got the required permits from the city. I made sure it complied with every regulation you could imagine. The fence was 6 feet tall, made of durable cedar, and stained a natural color that blended with the surroundings. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth every penny for the privacy it gave us. For 6 years, not a single complaint, not a word from anyone. Then our neighborhood HOA got a new president, Richard Harrington. If you've ever met a man who let a little bit of authority go straight to his head, you know exactly the type. Mid-50s, always in a pressed shirt, carrying a clipboard like it was some kind of royal scepter. The first I heard of any issue was when I found a bright orange notice taped to my front door. Violation. Unauthorized structure. It claimed my fence was not approved by the HOA and needed to be removed within 30 days or face fines of $100 per day. I was confused, to say the least. I'd lived here for 22 years and had never heard of any HOA approval needed for fences. In fact, several of my neighbors had similar fences, some even taller than mine. I called the number on the notice and spoke with Richard himself. "Sir," I said, trying to remain polite, "I've had this fence for 6 years without any issues. I followed all city codes and got the proper permits. What seems to be the problem?" "The problem, Mr. Donovan," he replied, in a tone that suggested I was a child being scolded, "is that you failed to get approval from the Architectural Review Committee before installing your fence. It's clearly stated in the bylaws." "I've never heard of this committee," I said, "and I've been here longer than you have." "That's irrelevant," he snapped. "The fence must come down or you'll start accruing fines." I decided to do some digging. I went through all the HOA documents I had received when I bought the house. Nothing about an architectural review committee. I asked my neighbor Joe, who'd been in the neighborhood since it was founded in 1987. "Never heard of it," Joe said, shaking his head. "And I was on the HOA board for 12 years. This Harrington's making up rules as he goes along." Armed with this information, I sent a certified letter to the HOA explaining that there was no such committee mentioned in any of the original bylaws and that my fence complied with all city regulations. I included copies of my permits and a property survey showing the fence was entirely on my land. 30 days passed. No response. Then another notice arrived. This one stating that I owed $3,000 in fines and that if the fence wasn't removed within 2 weeks, the HOA would hire a contractor to remove it at my expense. You wouldn't believe what they did next. I came home from a doctor's appointment to find a surveyor taking measurements on my property. When I asked what he was doing, he told me the HOA had hired him to verify the property line. "The fence is 2 inches over the property line," he said, not meeting my eyes. I've been instructed to mark it for removal. 2 inches. After 22 years of erosion and shifting ground, they were going to make an issue over 2 inches. I called the city building inspector, a man named Mike, who I'd worked with before when I was building my workshop. He came out, took his own measurements, and shook his head. Bill, this fence is well within acceptable variance. Even if it were 2 inches over, which it's not, my measurements show it's actually 6 inches inside your property line. No city inspector would make you move it for that. He wrote up an official letter stating the fence was in compliance with all city regulations, which I immediately sent to the HOA. Another 2 weeks went by. I thought maybe they'd finally back down. How wrong I was. I was sitting on my back porch, enjoying my morning coffee, when I heard the rumble of heavy machinery. Peering around the corner of my house, I saw a bulldozer turning into my driveway, followed by a police car, and none other than Richard Harrington, standing there with a self-satisfied smirk on his face. My blood ran cold. They were actually going to do it. I rushed out to meet them, positioning myself between the bulldozer and my fence. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded. The police officer held up a hand. "Sir, I have a court order here permitting the removal of this structure." "A court order? I haven't been served with any court order." I was incredulous. Richard stepped forward, waving a piece of paper. "We obtained an emergency injunction, Mr. Donovan. Your fence is coming down today. I noticed something, though." The paper he was waving didn't look official. No court seal, no judge's signature. Just something printed on regular paper. "I'm going to need to see that," I said, holding out my hand. Richard hesitated, then reluctantly handed it over. As I suspected, it wasn't a court order at all. Just a letter from the HOA's lawyer claiming they had the right to remove the fence. "This isn't a court order," I said, handing it to the police officer. "This is a letter from their lawyer. You have no legal right to be on my property." The officer examined it, his expression darkening. "Sir, this is indeed not a court order. I'm going to have to ask you to leave this property." Richard's face turned bright red. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling our lawyer." "Be my guest," I said. "But you and your bulldozer friend are trespassing." He stormed off, making a phone call, while the officer apologized for the confusion. The bulldozer driver, looking embarrassed, backed out of my driveway and left. If this HOA sounds unbelievable already, make sure to hit subscribe. You don't want to miss how this ends. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. But Richard and his HOA board were just getting started. The very next day, I received a certified letter informing me that I was being fined $5,000 for harassment of HOA officials and contractors. They also claimed I had violated some obscure provision about maintaining community harmony and threatened to place a lien on my house if I didn't pay up. That's when I knew this had gone beyond a simple dispute. This was personal. I contacted a lawyer recommended by a friend, David Martinez, a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. When I laid out everything that had happened, David's eyes narrowed. "Bill, they've crossed several lines here. That fake court order could constitute fraud. And these fines they're imposing? They're not following their own procedures." David asked to see all the HOA documents I had, the original bylaws, any amendments, meeting minutes, everything. I spent the next week gathering everything I could find. What we discovered was shocking. The Architectural Review Committee Richard kept mentioning, it had been disbanded in 1996, long before I built my fence. The provision he was citing to fine me, it had been amended out of the bylaws in 2001, and the Community Harmony Clause? It had never existed at all. But the most damning discovery came when David obtained the official property records for our neighborhood. It turned out that the HOA's authority only extended to the common areas. parks, entrances, and shared facilities. They had absolutely no jurisdiction over what homeowners did on their own property, as long as it complied with city regulations. They've been bullying homeowners for years, based on authority they don't actually have, David explained. And they've been collecting fines illegally. Armed with this information, we filed a lawsuit against the HOA, not just to stop them from harassing me about my fence, but to recover all the illegal fines they had collected from residents over the past 10 years. The discovery process was enlightening. We obtained emails between Richard and the HOA board members discussing ways to control the neighborhood appearance. In one email, Richard specifically targeted several homeowners, including me, calling our properties eyesores that needed to be dealt with. We also found financial records showing that the HOA had been using the fine money for purposes not authorized in their bylaws, including paying for Richard's travel to HOA leadership conferences at luxury resorts. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I was nervous. Richard and the entire HOA board were there, along with their high-priced lawyer. I had David, and I had the truth on my side. Richard's lawyer presented their case first, arguing that the fence violated the community's aesthetic standards and that I had willfully ignored HOA directives. Then it was David's turn. He methodically dismantled their case, presenting evidence that the HOA had no authority over individual properties too. The Architectural Review Committee no longer existed. 3. The provisions they were citing had been amended out of the bylaws. 4. They had attempted fraud with the fake court. Order 5. They had been collecting illegal fines for years. The judge listened intently, asking questions and taking notes. When both sides had presented their case, he deliberated for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he returned to the bench. After reviewing the evidence presented, he began, "It's clear that the HOA has overstepped its authority significantly. Not only do they lack jurisdiction over Mr. Donovan's fence, but they have been operating outside their legal mandate for years." He ruled in my favor, ordering the HOA to 1. Cease all attempts to remove or alter my fence. 2. Refund all illegal fines collected over the past 10 years, totaling over $200,000. Pay my legal fees. 4. Undergo a complete audit of their finances. 5. Remove Richard Harrington as president and bar him from ever serving on the board again. The look on Richard's face was priceless. He actually sputtered, but the community standards. The judge wasn't having it. "Sir, you've been running what amounts to a protection racket. Consider yourself fortunate that Mr. Donovan isn't pressing criminal charges for the fraudulent court order." As we left the courtroom, several other homeowners approached me, thanking me for standing up to the HOA. Many of them had been intimidated into paying fines or making changes to their properties over the years. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood changed. With the HOA's illegal authority exposed, a new board was elected, one that focused on maintaining the common areas and leaving homeowners alone. My fence, of course, remained exactly where it was. Looking back, I'm glad